So this panel will, I'm sure, take a slightly different tactic. We represent on this panel more the side of those creating new solutions and providing acceptance devices as well as mobile wallets. So this will take more of the issuing side of things, I expect, but the questions will, of course, come from the floor, and these guys, I'm sure, will be ready to handle whatever you throw at them. I'd like to ask you to start thinking about your questions. I'll start by moderating and asking questions of the panelists, but at the end there is time for audience questions. And we will, just in case nobody wants to put their hand up, offer a book. Glenbrook has written a book called Payment Systems in the U.S., a Payments Professional's Guide to Payments. So it's not your totally basic intro guide. It's for payments people. And the first person that asks a question will get a book. So please feel free to get right in there, and perhaps the first two, depending on how we go on that. So just hopefully that'll keep you awake through the panel and ready to ask your questions when you stand. So without further ado, I'd like to start by introducing Marc Warshawsky. He's the Senior Vice President, Mobile Channel Executive, Bank of America. Marc, could you wave? So everyone, thanks. Where he is responsible for the strategy planning and channel management activities for the largest mobile banking provider in the U.S. I'm going to start with a question and introduce each one of them with their bio and a first question. So don't worry, I will get to the rest of the panel, but I'd like to start by asking Marc, what has Bank of America's approach been to mobile payments?
When we look at mobile payments, we start with the fundamental.
Can we get the mic under him?
Oh,
thank you.
Thanks. When we think about mobile payments, we start with a fundamental belief that there's value in the ecosystem. There's value for the consumer. There's value for the retailers. There's value in the end-to-end experience. And so when we look at that, we start shaping what we want to be. And what we want to be to our customers is a place to provide simple, safe, reliable payments mechanisms in a way that's more engaging and more enriching than what we may offer today. To do that, we've done a lot of trials. We've done several mobile payments trials. We've gotten a lot of great learnings from those trials. We see that customers do value this capability, that they do like this experience. But we've also learned that it's got to be very simple and very easy to use. So we take that knowledge and then look across the landscape and see what we see going on in the landscape. In the landscape, what we see is a lot of new technologies, a lot of new market entrants, a lot of different partnerships forming, things like that. To us, this indicates we're very early in the life cycle. But if you go back to that belief that there's fundamental value there, then that helps set your compass direction on what you need to be doing. What we're doing is evaluating all of those options, figuring out which ones will provide the most value to our customers, will provide the best experience to our customer. And ultimately, we're placing multiple bets in that space.
In a second, we're not sitting in the order that I had everything past. Excuse me. Next, I'd like to introduce Ed Busby. He's the Chief Commerce Officer at ISIS, leading their commerce strategy development, including product, pricing, and strategic relationships. He comes from being a partner at the Boston Consulting Group in telecoms and is quite eloquent, having been a consultant. So you can ask him some of the tougher questions on the panel.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I've only known you for a short time, but I think I got that read off the first time. Ed, a lot has been said regarding the value in mobile commerce beyond payments. So where do you see that value being created, and what specifically is ISIS's role in creating value for merchants and or consumers?
Sure. So when I was at BCG, we were very fond of the quote from Archimedes that said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I will move the world." To which my assistant said, "The lesson I learned is don't be the fulcrum." So when we look out there, I think we're creating an incredible amount of value, and the commerce experience is inextricably linked now to payments. If we look out at Japan and their experience with Docomo, what they will tell you is having offers on the phone is what really drove payments. It drove the adoption. 20% of Docomo's customers have downloaded and regularly used the McDonald's app. And where that created the most value was around loyalty. If we look to date at most of the efforts that have been out there, largely it's been around creating coupons, which are great for discovery, but really aren't great for the vast majority of merchants. As we were discussing today, this morning, Tom, it's largely around this idea of going to large merchants where the bulk of transactions happen. If you talk to them, they will tell you that, much like we heard yesterday, everybody is trying to basically give away their gross margin. My friend Alejandro Alvarez is a marketer at Banana Republic. And he's fond of saying, everybody is knocking on my door saying they can give away my gross margin faster than everybody else. So when I look at mobile commerce in general, I think we're at version -1.0 at this point. And it's largely around coupons to incentivize use of the product. But that actually doesn't work for either the merchants nor for the consumers. If I were to look at consumers, where do I personally as a consumer really engage with the brand? It's really around Starwood, right? So we all get the Starwood, for those of us who travel a lot, you engage on a day-to-day basis with Starwood. They send you an email, it's actually one of the few emails that you don't automatically move to your junk mail folder, right? And you engage on a day-to-day basis, almost in an addictive nature. And really, that's really where the overlap from our perspective sits between what the merchant wants and what consumers want, and it's that area of loyalty. So as we see the evolution, we really want to bring that value to both the eyeballs of the consumer as well as to the bulk of merchants, to really move away from this idea of just coupon after coupon after coupon. But in the short run, we do need to get people using the wallet. I wake up every day and say, how do I get people to do this and do this? How do I get them to pay? And how do I get them to look at the feed or whatever real estate that we have? And so in the short term, what you are going to see is, getting back to the McDonald's point, this drive to use coupons to incentivize usage. But really, that's just going to be in the early days. And what I expect to see in the long run is a lot of value created. And we are hoping to be that Archimedes lever that raises the rest of the industry. Of course, we want to collect rents for doing that, but you can't do that unless you create the value, and that's really where we see commerce going in the long run.
Thank you. Next on our panel is Peter Ho. He is a vice president and product manager in the product innovation team at Wells Fargo. So again, we have the issuing side and innovation in banking represented. His recent focus has been around chip-based payments, of which mobile plays a key role. His team has had 2 mobile payment pilots, one that was NFC and another micro SD based, and he's also been responsible for the launching of Rapid Alerts, which is the last time I met Peter. We were discussing that product more. So Peter, what do you feel banks bring to innovation in the mobile space?
I'm sorry.
What do you feel banks bring to innovation in mobile payments?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and one that we have spent a lot of time thinking about. One of the things that we like to think about it from a financial services provider perspective is that we provide safe, secure transactional capabilities for our customers, and at Wells Fargo, we also believe that we want to be able to allow our customers to pay how they want, when they want, where they want. And so, with us being in that space and being very used to managing and securing payments, we believe that we have that level of trust that Tom was talking about earlier, and that we also, I think, have an incredible amount of information about our customers and how they transact and understand how they would like to transact going into the future. And so from my point of view, I think as a financial services provider, we are a key player in the sense that we understand we've been managing payments for Wells Fargo's case 160 plus years. And I think we're a great complement, and I think this is one of the things that we're trying to get our arms around, and I've been talking about for quite some time, is we're a complement to the other side of NFC and NFC payments, which is basically the carrier side. And we're still learning how to play with 2 very large industries who are both very capable of managing their customers, and how do we bring them together. But I think overall, our biggest piece in this play is the fact that we have been working with our customers in the payment space. We've earned their trust, and we look forward to keeping their trust. and helping them succeed in whatever they want to do from a financial services perspective.
Thank you. And to my direct left is Oscar Muñoz, who's the Executive Vice President and Senior Vice President of International Business Development for Charge Anywhere. And you may have seen their booth in the next room. Oscar is a serial entrepreneur, having started an ISO for merchant services and other companies, including an open-loop prepaid issuing company enabled by the mobile phone. Charge Anywhere is involved in both the payment issuance side of mobile or digital wallets and mobile payment acceptance. And they have some very interesting mobile acceptance devices that aren't just a little square thing that goes on top of the phone. They actually have the full-on capabilities. And Oscar, I have a double question for you because you asked for it. So don't think I'm just picking on Oscar. Where do you feel innovation is coming from in the mobile space? And in particular, what do you feel banks bring to the table?
Yeah, that's a good loaded question. I think that we particularly, we stand from, we're in a good position to talk about this. And personally, payments is all I have done from my graduate studies to my working experience, on one side or the other, acquiring or issuing. So I have seen innovation coming from so many angles. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not that old, right? I was born in 1970, which, by the way, for those of you who do not know, EMB was also created in 1970, right? We know that the first batch came out in 82, 84 in France, but 41 years later, here I am, and EMB has no traction, so I'm doing a little better. You can see that some of my gray hairs I got with EMB, I got another few with NFC, I got quite a few of them with biometrics, and here we are in the mobile rodeo, So I see innovation. I will start backward by saying the innovation that we see that stick and succeed is the innovation that comes out of a real need. And I'll talk about different angles of innovation. I'll try to be concise, but I'll give you an example very close to our heart. Our company was created on the basis of accepting payments on beepers, on pagers. If I was to ask you or anybody in the audience, when was the last time you saw a beeper, right? And if you happen to be rocking a beeper, don't raise your hand. But we're not a new guy, trying to accept payments on phones, which is cool. We actually patented the concept of putting a card reader to a pager. Back then it was a RIM 950, and turning that into the first ruggedized, user-friendly, robust way to accept payments. And why? Because there was a need. We were merchant acquirers, and the reality that back then, when merchants had the option, you got merchants that really need mobility. There's no way around that. And you have the obvious contractors that go to your home to try to work, plumbing, electricians, what have you. But then you had the folks in the taxi drive, the taxi transportation companies, that the options they had back then was to spend, $4,000. And I say $4,000 because by the time it reaches the merchant, the way the U.S. industry is set up, the merchant was paying, $4,000 plus for a device that, I don't know if you recall the company, U.S. Wireless Data, that is no longer around. I love that they threw incredible bikes. I love that. But, and they had this huge device that would come in a big box like that would take a whole seat for the taxi driver. And so the option was either I buy this huge device, or I call headquarters and I give them manually the numbers of the passenger, which we know is not too convenient, it's not too fast, it's not too safe. So there was a real need in there for mobility, something that I can carry around that is really mobile, that is not going to make my transaction downgrade as a card not present transaction. By the time the taxi driver was paying for the fees, he was paying 10% up the surcharge, even though it's not the real surcharge of the taxi company was paying. So there was a need to create a mobile solution to do that, and that's what we did. And then when you see other projects like in Africa, there's no financial rails, so there's a need to use the telco rails. And I see other innovation that might be coming from, for example, we work in markets that are oligopolies, or let's say they're monopolies, of only a few people controlling what happens in payments. And when you're a merchant and you have no control of what goes into your point-of-sale system, you might want to decide to go and work outside of your point-of-sale system. And for example, in Brazil, there's 76 private label companies with millions and millions of cardholders that are issuing at the supermarket, at the store level. But now they have a problem that cannot be accepted in the same payment where I accept the big card companies. So by having now mobility, I can accept those payments and I can extend my footprint because I got to fight that market. And then we also see innovation that comes out of people that pretty simply just have too much time or money in their hands. And I can talk about a lot of them, but I'll mention one that is very close to the title of this event. Please don't shoot me. Let's talk about NFC, right? NFC was created in 2002. First batch came out over there in the Philips Arena in Atlanta. And the reality is that we try to come out with this product, and I will call it a solution looking for a problem. You know, the car, MaxDrive, as the gentleman was saying, works very well. And we couldn't convince consumers, no matter how many billions of dollars we spent, that this was different than this. There was just no way of convincing that. I always think about, you know, me coming up with a way that instead of mixing your drinks like this, I'm going to mix it like this. That's going to be so. Now we have mobile and NFC found a new life. So I will conclude by saying there that I see innovation coming from different angles, ingenuity of people. There's innovation, but the innovation that we see in the projects that will work, that really stick, is the innovation that is really coming out of a real problem and out of a real need. And to answer the part of the bank, I will be very short. The bank brings trust. The projects in where, I don't know if you guys recall when PIN debit was changed for check cards, and how did that happen? I don't think we ever questioned that. How did, I mean, besides the fact that the invisible hand of Alan Smith, right, really is good. You make interchange instead of a few cents per transaction, so that's important. But the way people changed from taking an Honor, a Star, a PIN-based debit card was very simple. When you went to your bank, before they would give you a PIN debit card, when you started opening a checking account, they gave you a check card. There was no options, there were no questions. You came out with your generic checkbook and you came out with a check card in your hands. So if we see that happening now where you go to your bank, the person you trust with your money, and now they give you your generic checkbook and they give you your accounts on your phone, maybe that's what they bring. The fact that people trust the institutions. And I probably overextended. Thank you.
So can I respond to the NFC question?
Absolutely.
As one might imagine. You know, we've heard a lot about the fact that NFC is basically a solution looking for a problem. And, you know, it is true. When I wake up every day, everybody asks me, who's your biggest competitor? I'm not going to name them. But, you know, the biggest competitor that we say every day is plastic, right? This is what I wake up worrying about every morning. I don't worry about the long tail of competitors. In fact, you know, when I was at BCG, I used to do a lot of work in the soda industry. And the soda industry, when the executives walk out, they have mats outside of their offices where they wipe their feet on a picture of the crumpled up can of their competitors. They meet their competitors. True story. I wake up every day cheering for all my competitors because we are not going to win or lose because we're going to beat, you know, the other guys. We're going to win or lose because people are going to transition from using plastic to using NFC or the host of other options out there. I'm not saying NFC is the only solution. There are a lot. But, you know, if we look at Starbucks, who I don't see as a competitor, you know, I think they proved the thesis, right? That people will transition off of plastic, that there is value that's there. And, you know, when you go up to, you know, a random McDonald's in Miami, which I did a couple weeks ago, not in the target market for anybody, and you use that technology, and you see the guy behind the counter like literally jump back and say, wow, you know, it convinces you there is a value there. In the short term, it's the novelty. In the medium term, it's convenience. In the long term, it's about all the value you can create on the phone. So, you know, I am not as pessimistic on the technology that says, oh, you know, plastic is so easy to use. It is, you know, but so are coins. And, you know, there is value that's being created. So I think people, the slings and arrows that we've been ducking on NFC, I think quite overplayed, in my opinion, over the last couple of days, for what it's worth.
So I'm going to actually ask you another question on that, and I'll take this opportunity to do it.
So open the slings and arrows.
Well, the slings and arrows are interesting, because I think it isn't so much that consumers truly believe that doing this is very useful, right? It to them seems intuitive. It should do it, right? This should work, and they love to just carry their phone, or even better, forget the phone altogether and do the PayPal at point of sale from their brains. But still, we'll go with the let's do this, right? And once they're there, you talk about all this value that's created. Mm-hmm. So where are we on that? where's the value coming from, right? And how are we getting there? And you mentioned some of that when you went in your intro around loyalty as opposed to couponing, right? Actual loyalty programming. So can you fill that thought in a little more?
Sure. So in the near term, there is very little value that's been created beyond the convenience factor, quite frankly. We've seen it a little bit with some of the long-tail merchants in terms of some of the couponing that's been done, and we're going to do some of that. I mean, clearly, we're going to provide incentives for people to use the technology. We're not going to see the real value created, quite frankly, until we get to a much higher degree of scale than we're going to have up front. So basically, what you're going to see, and you're already seeing it with a lot of the competitors, are basically these efforts to what I would say prime the pump, right? To get people to start using the technology on a day-to-day basis. In terms of what the value is going to be in the long term, I mean, there are several things that, I think people are going to have the convenience factor when you start seeing things like Smart Tap or some of the other technology solutions that are being adopted so that you can have single taps at the register. Second, I think you're going to see the development of loyalty programs and use of gamification in ways that we can't even imagine today, that folks outside of the payments industry have been playing around with for a while, but starting to see them applied in very fundamentally different ways to the retail experience. Then the third is going to be around targeting. That's the other point of intersection where, if you look at consumers have been willing to provide more and more information if they see something that comes back. So, what we will create is basically a deal with our consumers. We're not going to, steal their data without giving something back to them, in return. It's going to be a common agreement between us about what they want to share with their issuers, what they're sharing with the merchants, and the way that they interact with each other going forward.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I think one of the things that is also driving this right now is to your point, right? We have this great long tail vision of what it can do, what NFC can do, and what it's capable of doing, and it's very powerful. It really is. But the first thing that we got to do is get customers accustomed to, right? And we started this with contactless payment, and I think one of the biggest learnings that we got out of contactless payment was the fact that until you can teach consumers to do this, merchants aren't going to be familiar with doing this.
That's right.
Right, because your consumers are ultimately going to be the same people on the other side of the counter accepting your payment. And so if they're not used to this motion, they're going to sit there and go, why are you doing that? That thing doesn't work. Right. I've experienced that at many, many locations. Right.
And then you see the look of fear coming over the eyes of the associate as you come up with the phone.
And then you're both looking at, waiting for that receipt to print out. Oh, got it for bulky things. And then the next thing you know, you walk in with the phone, and you certainly get rockstar status, right? Wow, that's awesome. And then we have rapid alerts, and so wait for it. Here's my receipt, ding. Right? And so that's really cool. And we see that excitement. The thing is, how do we translate that excitement from one-off experiences to a broader-based experience? And the biggest challenge on that right now, in my personal opinion, is having those handsets out there. And in many cases, handsets that many people, if you have a more powerful smartphone in your pocket, there's a pretty good chance NFC is sitting in it. No secure element capabilities, but you can still use it for various tags and discovery efforts and things like that. It's that kind of test and learn, I think, from the consumer perspective, that's going to drive us to getting to, hey, I want to do a payment, and the next thing I know, wow, if I keep doing these payments, oh look, my bank's not giving me, or one of my favorite merchants is giving me an offer, and that's how the evolution, I think, is going to occur. And there is a challenge out there, right? To that earlier point, we're giving away everyone's gross margin, and it's a tough thing to do. But those are the things that I think that's challenging the industry right now. I think both on financial services side, especially definitely on the Wells Fargo side, and more than likely I won't speak for you, but on the carrier side. So,
Marc, what do you think will drive innovation in mobile payments?
I think innovation in mobile payments starts with candidly, a very simple premise, a simple principle, and that is, can you do more with a phone with all of its features and capabilities and technology than you can with a plastic card? And if you believe the answer to that is yes, and you believe that not necessarily that customers are asking for various capabilities, but they have latent needs that can be met through the technology that's available on the phone, that's what starts driving the innovation. The idea that, we had talked earlier about the faster horse analogy, and even though to that Henry Ford's quote, they would have asked for a faster horse, really what they were asking for is, how can I move more quickly? And I think we see that same analogy here, that people want to be in control of their finances, they want to be able to manage those, they want to save when they shop, they want to have the convenience, the trust, the privacy, the security, the fraud prevention. All of that is enhanced, can be enhanced through a mobile device. And so when you start putting those pieces together, that's where innovation starts happening. And so that's why we see a whole slew of new technologies out there. What's going to win? Nobody knows, but just the idea that everybody's working towards this goal of trying to figure out how to add value to the customer's end-to-end purchase experience, that's what's going to drive the innovation.
Oscar, what do you see as the most interesting emerging product or solution in mobile payments right now?
Question two. From where we stand, what I see now is that there's obviously, and it ties up to the previous question. There's a U.S. EMB roadmap for the first time. We have been working internationally, and the world is EMB instead of the U.S. Does that mean that everybody's going to jump on that bandwagon? I don't know, but I know that as of this October, the PCI fees, that is over $2 billion, will be waived for those that qualify. Then next April, the processors need to be able to accept EMB, and by October 2015, and I think in the other regions where I've worked, when the liability shift hits home, then that's when people really start going at it. Because now I'm liable for anything that happened as a weakest link. So what we're seeing is that we actually started, and we're well involved with a few companies that I know of that is doing EMB on mobile. So we enable phones and tablets to be able to accept EMB 1 or 2, so PIN, debit, swipe, or EMB. And I don't want to sound pessimistic, by the way. I want you guys to know that as a platform provider, we enable them all. We enable NFC, we enable EMB, we actually also have biometrics technology. So that's what we do. I just sometimes talk as a consumer as well. So mobile acceptance of EMB for me is a hot thing. NFC, with all the phones that are coming out with NFC, it's important to be able to work with that as well. And finally, one of the latest trends as well is the ability to give the small and medium merchant to have the big box functionality and capabilities that the other ones have on their cash register by providing mobile cash registers on tablets that they're a lot of times using kind of a software as a service kind of product. So those are the items that I see.
Yeah, and that tablet is providing very interesting innovation. And I live luckily, in wine country in the Napa Valley. And I didn't expect it, but I got a lot of phone calls all of a sudden. No one knew what I did for the longest time, right? I live in wine country. Everyone I know sells wine, makes wine, or provides food that goes with wine, right? And so I'm in mobile payments, I'm in payments. Yeah. Right? That's the end of the cocktail conversation on what I do when we talk about them. So all of a sudden, about a year ago, I started getting a lot of questions about accepting payments off tablets, because for the wineries, their ability to create an experience in the vineyard, has really transformed that customer experience. It used to be they'd have these beautiful settings, a wonderful experience in the vineyard, at a beautiful table laid with food and wine and an experience. And what do they want? They want that purchase to happen right there, right then. And instead, they had to stop that conversation, get everyone packed up and ready to go, and get them into a room where they could create a transaction. So this ability of creating an anywhere transaction has a brand new meaning in the Napa Valley, where you can actually do it in this beautiful setting. We're not just talking about having your customer service rep in a store, which is also very useful, being able to do service and sales at the same time, which is an excellent example as well. But in the Napa Valley, it really came to light for me as to what anywhere transactions really could mean, because you've got this beautiful image and creation created for you. So the next question is for Peter, and it sort of goes off some of your other experiences. In addition to NFC, what other solutions do you feel are driving the innovation in mobile and contactless payment?
I think there are a few really promising things going on in the industry right now. We're seeing a lot of companies, one very big one down in Mountain View, yet another relatively big one, or very big one as well in the Silicon Valley, getting into the payment space. And I think it's definitely highlighting the fact that to consumers that you have options. And I think options are good in many respects, because on the one hand, it shows variety, but at the same time it also helps customers identify which payment methods are the best method for them. In many cases, it also highlights, I think, one thing that us as issuers have really been victims of our own success, which basically is we haven't really done a great job of educating our cardholders on how payments actually work, right? We've taught this, get an approval, move on with life. But what happens in the background, right? How do we authenticate payments? How do we secure that payment? And by having some of these competitors popping up, alternative payment methods, whatever you want to call them, I think it's bringing more attention to the general public in terms of how payments are processed and how do you feel secure when a payment is processed. And I think that's a very important conversation to have. I think a lot of people have been challenging the security of contactless payment, and many of us here in this room who understand it know that there's a lot of debatable topics there, to put it very politely. But by having some of these new payment innovations come out, though, I think it really does highlight that, and it gives us the opportunity to have that conversation with the consumer. And I really look forward to doing that, because I think ultimately I want to make sure my consumer understands what they're using, what they have, and so that they can also understand how they need to secure it. As we move to mobile devices, there's all sorts of talk about, what happens there, right? Is it different from a card? No, not really. Someone steals my phone, the same thing as steals my wallet. If I don't have a high-level locked code on my phone, realistically speaking, it's really no different than someone stealing my wallet, right? But if someone wants to, lock the phone down. One of the things we learned from our first NFC pilot, very early stages, just about everybody had a PIN. By the time we finished the pilot 6 months later, most people took the PIN off. It was too much of a hassle. But at the same time, I think there were certain people that just gave us the feedback. So when we went into microSD, we actually didn't put a PIN on the application itself, figuring people had high-level lock, codes or passwords or whatever. And the biggest feedback we got was, "Hey, what happened to the PIN?" So, so I mean, the key here is really build it so your customer gets to select how they want to manage it. And getting back to the question, and that is, also let the customer experience other things. I think that's a very, positive way for a customer to engage in something that, I think until, most recently has been a pretty mundane, standard thing. I swipe my card and I get approval. Done.
So just to prep the audience, we're going to, are you getting ready in your heads? I'm ready for that first question that's going to get a book. Oh, we've got one.
Got it.
Oh. You can be number 2.
Thanks. I actually have a question for Ed. And earlier today there was a little bit of discussion relative to the future of multiple wallets. And given the fact that ICE is really a wireless carrier initiative, and given the fact that Verizon had blocked the Google Wallet off Nexus phone, does ICE share that same view as well, that there be multiple wallets?
So from our perspective, we're open to working with everyone. There's a practical constraint on how many wallets can fit on a secure element. In terms of what Verizon does, AT&T, or any of our partners, I won't speak for them. All I'll say is, we're working as hard as we can and as fast as we can to, partner with as many folks as possible. There are a lot of choices we could have made in architecting our business model. We tried to do something that, as Jim Stapleton, our head of sales, says, runs in the direction of the horses. We're trying to support the existing ecosystem that we have, so supporting the existing networks, supporting the issuers, supporting the merchants. And I think you'll find, at least philosophically, we are trying to be as open as humanly possible in doing that. So, like I said, you can talk to Verizon about their specific plans, but we're hoping to work with and talk to everyone that's out there.
Okay, did you find number 2?
I found number 2.
Number 2 it is.
Hi, and thank you for your comments thus far. They've been really interesting. My question really is around this notion of innovation, because certainly all of you gentlemen, and every panel I think that we've had up there has been talking about innovation and how are banks innovating and how are you innovating and carriers, how are they innovating. When I think about innovators and successful innovators in the marketplace, Apple comes to mind. And they've had a consumer in mind, but they haven't been going to the consumer and saying, what do you want? What is it that is going to make you happy? They've come up with that idea, and they've introduced the notion that this is how people, rather than understanding how, for instance, a payment is made, understanding really what the end result is. It's easy, it's convenient for me. So my question for you, all of you, is when you're innovating, what's the one big thing that all of you are working on that's going to, you think, really be successful? Not really cool, not interesting, not, gee, I hope consumers learn more from this, but what do you think is really going to work? Just your opinions.
What moves the needle?
I'll take first crack at that. Again, I think it goes back to those core needs that customers have when they're buying, purchasing, paying for things. If you center on those things and center on how you can make that experience more enriching, more engaging, more convenient, then I think you'll start heading towards a winning formula. It can't just be about this is really neat to do. It can't be about the early adopters that think that this is a great, a very cool thing to do. It's really got to be about creating that experience that works across the masses, and one that really enhances that end-to-end experience. And there are dozens of examples that you've seen over the past decade that point to where that value can be injected into the system, and those are the types of things that we're working on.
So very, very similar response. We at ISIS look at the purchasing occasions that individual consumers go through, and the pain points that they suffer along those points. Over my years as a consultant, many years. I've been with consumers when they're purchasing chocolate, when they're purchasing jewelry, grocery, and you understand that when you understand what the process is, what people do from research to selecting where to go to the in-store experience, and really beyond in loyalty as well. You understand that there are real pain points that we can potentially solve if we think creatively about the role that payments has, not just at the checkout point, but throughout that shopping process. And that's what we're looking at to really think of what the next generation of this product looks like. But again, going back to our previous point, we just need people to do this and this. Once they do that, we can, that'll be my lever to move the world.
I'll take a crack at it as well. I think an important part of that question, my answer will be neutrality, and I'll explain a little bit more, but what is really concerning me sometimes is that sometimes we're acting like this is our first rodeo, and I'm not sure if we're not seeing that if history can be our best teacher. I can give you money, and I'll give you a great example. If you ask me what is more convenient and what is more secure than my finger, this finger, by the way, I would say this is how I want to pay, right, with my finger. And we all know what happened to pay by touch and BioPay and what happened there. So you cannot do all these focus groups and all the surveys and all the things to talk about the issuing side of the business without involving the acquiring side of the business. If I give you money on your finger, on your eye, on a piece of plastic, on a chip, on an NFC, I give it to you on a phone. And you don't have merchants willing and able to exchange that for products and services to monetize that. You have given them nothing. It's a $1,000 bill that you cannot catch. So, so as we continue to see what is going to succeed, whatever is going to succeed is going to be that equation that not only is completely neutral. So if you want to set EMV, that's it. If you want to do QR tax, that's it. If you want to do NFC, that's it. But that it is including, it's not a fight on the issuing side to see who's going to take money from whose pocket. You know, I'm an issuer, but I'm going to have to pay you to put that card in this thing. I'm going to, well, then I'm going to have a control element of the secure element, and I'm going to seal this and you can't use it. So when that fight continues to happen, at the end, the real things that we're looking at is, yeah, what are the pain points of that experience, but also from the merchant. Because when we talk, I'll give you an example that has been mentioned several times, and I'm about to die back there every time I hear it. I'll buy it, you know, from somebody that actually knocked doors on merchants, and that have merchants today. I can tell you that if you walk out of my door, one of my merchants, or one of my Latino merchants, with a product in your hand, you're probably going to get shot. So, you know, the city creed by giving you information, that's great, but so I remember speaking next to the high management of our buyer, you know, they're around 1, 2, or 3, that's a new thing, we could get investment money. If you have a mobile in your name, it's like having a .com back in the 1990s, you're a hot thing. And I asked him, I said, so let me ask you, how do you work with the checkout, right? Because the whole idea of Outlier is that you can self-checkout and you never have to stop at a line again. Oh, well, we check at the door. So you check at the door, and yeah, we check 1 of every 3 people. And I asked, well, what happens to the other 2? They don't steal? And okay, well, let me ask you, the other 2, because they have this one example of this baby store that sell, you know, I looked at the site and they have this stroller that is $700. And I said, so what happens if the second person has a stroller that is $700? Would you check that one? Because, you know, it's a high item kind of ticket. Well, and I said, well, I'll tell you what has happened in here. When I go to the checkout, I expect to stop and pay. That's a line I expect to do. When you stop me at the door, that's an insulting line that you're doing because maybe my last name is Muñoz or something else. I don't know, you know. Maybe I'm not white enough, I'm not dark enough, God knows. You know, I'm a thief, right? So you have moved the checkout line from where I expect to stop and pay to the door. I'm still doing the line. It's just that one I expect to do, the other one is insulting. So a lot of times we come up with technology for technology's sake. It has to be a balance of whatever is going to succeed, not just what we want to put in consumers' hands, what the merchant is willing to accept, what is going to be the interchange advantage for that merchant to take that payment. Our mobile transaction is going to be qualifying as a card not present transaction. I'm going to be paying off the roof. So that's what is going to win. Neutrality, whatever we want to do, and that is balance on both sides of that equation.
And I appreciate that because as someone who consults and helps people think through this space, we hear a lot about what the consumer wants and how the consumer needs. Well, the consumer doesn't have NFC yet in a lot of their phones. So we got to get that problem solved. And very seldom do people actually talk not about the consumer, but about the transaction, which is where you were at the beginning. But we really went back to the consumers. It's about the interaction between the merchant and consumer. And how do we enhance that experience? In a McDonald's line, it might be speed, but in other places, it might be something different that we can provide with the phone to that interaction that requires a merchant, which seems to be a dirty word sometimes in this business, but that's where it's all coming to play. So I'm glad you brought the merchants back.
So Jacqueline, we're up against time.
Yes.
You've assembled probably one of the most knowledgeable groups or panels on NFC. We can't leave without addressing some of the devil in the detail. So we know there's 2 forms of NFC, that one-way standard, the 14443. It's called card emulation mode. We have to load those card credentials into a secure element. But we also know that the newer standard, the 18092 or the 2-way standard, would allow us to access card credentials in the cloud. From each of the panelists' view, how does the business model change? If we're not storing card credentials in the phone, or having to put them in a secure element, or transfer them to the point of sale, and we're accessing them in the cloud. Why don't we start with Peter?
Well, thanks. I think there's a lot of promise coming from the cloud. The cloud obviously is something that's very powerful for a consumer as well as for a financial institution as well as a merchant. I think the one thing that I would like to see a little bit more definition around the cloud is how the transaction processing occurs at a more granular level. We all know that everything will flow back to the customer, or back to the issuer, and issuers still have the capability to make approvals. But in some respect, we just want to make sure that we're also protecting our customer as we see transactions come through, and we need to make sure that the same information that's being shared currently with a direct approval model is something similar to what we're going to see coming from any cloud player. And you know, again, wild west right now as far as what that looks like. But
so Ed,
one big thing would be that.
From a provider's standpoint, if you're not storing card credentials in a secure element, how might the business model change?
So, in the near term, obviously we're taking a more traditional path. We need to be able to get consumers to do this again every day. And the vast majority of transactions, our approach is primarily going to be the one that will enable consumers to do that and address the vast majority of transactions. When we think over the longer term, we are thinking about how does cloud change our approach? What particular pain points could we address both for the merchant and for the consumer? And so those thoughts are on our longer term roadmap, but for the near term, we're trying to just address that vast majority of occasions where we see people trying to pay, and just getting users to use their device for something more than calling, texting, and playing games.
So Marc, from a banker's standpoint, if you didn't have to store card credentials in a secure element, would you have to pay rents to a third party? And how's that change the business model for a bank?
The business models are complex. The solutions that you need to be thinking about need to be simple. And so what I would say to that is start with the experience that you want to create, start with the capabilities you want to have, and then let the technology and the business models follow.
And then Oscar, as a service provider, obviously if we go to the 18092 standard, it's more expensive terminals. The 250,000 that we've installed so far have to be thrown out, can't access that. What, from a merchant perspective, changes in this business model if we don't store payment credentials on the phone?
Well, I tell you, as a company, we're cloud-based all the way. There's maybe not a question on that you should be able to go in the cloud, securely include more than one card, maybe from more than one provider. And as a consumer, the wallet doesn't belong to the bank, doesn't belong to the telco, the phone provider belongs to you. The customer, you decide what card goes in there. The cloud allows you that flexibility. You stay away from that fight that is happening over the secure element at this point. Also a lot easier from the merchant perspective. You can accept it at the point of sale, through the point of sale, or you can accept it by actually just tapping your phone and a sign and having a kind of a gateway that ends up depositing to the merchant side again. So by having cloud-based, and also that I will argue that how secure that element is up for grabs yet. We're still in infancy here. As mobile, cybercrime continues to move to mobile crime, we'll see how secure something you can take out of a phone and use somewhere else really is. That's
Jacqueline, Oscar, Peter, Ed, Marc, thank you so much. It's been excellent.